Okay, so now we have looked at the basic market structure theory. We've looked at it on, really nice sort of simple utopian examples on those, line chart diagrams, those annotations. Obviously, when we go to apply that in the real market, it's a little bit different because we're going to be looking at Japanese candlestick charts, okay? So before we kind of get into that, I just want to do a very, very kind of overview, quick recap of what we just looked at in the previous lesson, right? So let's say price is in a bullish market and it is trending to the upside. So price makes a swing high. It pulls back to, potentially form that swing high low, right? But it's only once price moves to the upside and it actually breaks swing structure. So it breaks this swing high. This is what we call a boss. Okay, we refer to boss as the break of swing structure. So price breaks this swing high to now form a higher high. It's only once we get that break of structure that we can then look back and know for 100% certainty where the swing low is, okay? So the swing low is then the lowest point that went on to break the swing high. But we only can confirm where that higher low is, where that swing high low is, only once price breaks the high. Now, of course, we can anticipate down here when we're looking to trade that potentially this may be the high low forming, right? And we can buy down here, but we never know, and it's never confirmed that this is the high low until we get that break of structure. Okay, so then price breaks structure to the upside and it starts to form that higher high. So what do we expect after a break of structure? We expect a pullback on that time frame. So the first concept that we've looked at to help us potentially signal when that swing run, so when this swing run may be finished and when the pullback may be starting, is a change of character. Okay, so change of character is when the internal structure, so everything between the swing high and the swing low, everything in between that, I just keep it very, very simple and I refer to that as internal structure. So all of the little price movements that you'll see between the big swings in price, I simply just refer to those as internal structure. Okay, so when we get that swing break of structure and we form that swing higher high, to give us a signal that potentially the swing run, this big, pro trend move is over and that the pullback is starting, the swing pullback is starting, we can look for the internal structure to first switch bearish, okay? Not the swing structure, but the internal structure. We look for the first sign that that may be shifting bearish to facilitate the swing to pull back. So what I mean by that is you'll see little movements like this in price on the way up, okay? They're not swing pullbacks, they're just small minor movements, right? And eventually, after making a series of internal higher highs, high lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, eventually you'll see price move down and it will take out that internal low to make an internal lower low. Okay, so it's those little movements in price. The first time that kind of shows that sign of weakness, right? After a series of higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, and then we get that shift and we take out that internal low to make a lower low. That is what we refer to as a change of character. Okay, so at this point here, when that first happens, the internal structure is now bearish, okay, but the actual trend that we care about, the swing trend, is still bullish, right? Because the swing low is down here, right, this low here. So this here would be the range, right? You can mark that out with a horizontal line, the current range you are within. That is the swing low, okay? And now, at this point, let's say we assume this is a swing high, we can then mark that out and say this is our swing high here, okay? So now the internal structure has had a change of character. So the internal structure has switched bearish, but the swing structure is still bullish, okay? Now we can anticipate that we're going to get that swing pullback, all right? And the internal structure will most likely make those internal lower lows and internal lower highs. Now to anticipate where the next high low may form, right? So that we get that next swing move, one of the things that we can look for is for the internal structure to switch bullish. Okay, so we look for the internal structure to have that bullish change of character. Okay, so it's that first sign that potentially the internal structure is shifting to realign itself with the bullish swing trend. Okay, because the internal structure was bearish at this point, right? It's making a series of internal lower lows and lower highs. But then eventually we get that internal higher high, right? Where we get the bullish change of character. Okay, and now the internal structure, right? All of this has now realigned itself because this is now bullish, which is in line with the swing trend, okay? And the swing trend is this low to this high, right? So that's essentially what we're using change of character for. It's extremely aggressive because all it is it's the first little sign that the internal structure is shifting, whether that be bearish up here, right, where we get that bearish change of character, that can potentially signal, it's not a guarantee, but potentially signal that price or the swing is now pulling back to have that swing pullback, right? And then when we get a bullish change of character, that is the first potential signal from a structure standpoint that now the internal structure has now realigned with the swing structure because they are now both bullish, right? And that is just one signal that we can use that potentially the higher low is now forming and price is going to go on to target that weak high, okay? But you must understand that this concept on its own, change of character on the internal structure, it's very, very aggressive, okay? So this is why as we go throughout the course, you're going to learn how to pair this with a hell of a lot more confidence. Okay, but obviously we need to learn each concept on its own and really master that before we move on to the next, piece of confluence that we use, just so, we really need to understand it, okay? So in theory, this is how we kind of define the difference between swing structure and internal structure, and then how we are using breaks of structure. So that's when a swing high or swing low is broken. That's a break of structure, a boss. And then this here, the internal structure, I basically only will draw on when we get those initial changes of character, okay? So I'm not going to draw on every time an internal low is broken like this, okay? Because for me, it's pretty irrelevant. It's very tiny structure. It doesn't mean a lot. All I care about is the first time the internal structure shifts, okay? So when it's making a series of internal higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, the internal structure, when the first time that internal structure then makes a lower low, I then will mark that out as a change of character. Likewise, I'm not labeling all of these, okay, because that's just the internal structure staying bearish. But then once we get that first sign of an internal higher high, right, where it takes out the internal lower high to make a higher high, I will then mark that as a change of character. Okay, so I'm not marking all of this in here because it's pretty irrelevant. Okay, now one thing I'll add as well is I'm only really looking at changes of character in the live market when I'm trading when it comes into areas of high value. Okay, so obviously we're going to learn this later in the course, but let's say we have a nice big demand zone down here, and this poorly drawn orange rectangle is where I would be looking to buy. What I'm going to wait for is a little bit of confirmation, and I'm just looking for that internal change of character, right? The internal structure to switch bullish. Okay, just because it gives me that little bit of confirmation that potentially the internal structure is now shifting in my favor. It's confirming this level that I was interested in buying from. I've just waited for a little bit more confirmation to see the internal structure switch bullish. Okay, so when we get that change of character, I'll then mark that out and then I'll potentially look to get in long. Okay, we're going to get into this as we go, but I just want you to understand now that I'm not labeling everywhere really, because change of character is very aggressive, okay? Because this internal structure here, if I actually get rid of it, what you'll see in the live market is you'll get that initial bearish change of character up here, and then price may pull back a little bit, okay? And then it may move up here, and then you've got a bullish change of character. That is a bullish change of character, okay? Because it's the first time the internal structure has now switched bullish, okay? But where are we? We're quite high up in the leg, and what can happen is it can, as you've seen before in the previous lesson, it can move up a bit, and then we can get a bearish change of character. Right, then we make internal lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, and then we make an internal higher high, and now we've had a bullish change of character, okay? And it could go up a little bit, and then it could come back down again, right? And it can happen a lot because it's very, very aggressive. It's just the internal structure switching. So this is why we try and pair change of character with all the other concepts that we're going to learn, okay? I just want you to be getting thinking about that right now, that change of character is a great signal, but it's very, very aggressive, okay? So the moment you first see that bearish change of character up here, that is not a guarantee that suddenly we're going to pull back, okay? So if I get rid of all of this, what could very easily happen is, if I get the paintbrush, there we go, is we could get that bearish change of character, but it could be a full signal, and literally price could just continue up, right? And the swing trend could be very strong, and it can keep going. So this is why on its own, right, it's not, a great signal, but you need to understand how we map it and use it first, and then we'll add more confluence as we go, okay? So hopefully you're sort of beginning to understand the difference between swing and internal structure. Okay, so swing structure and internal structure are really the two main things in terms of market structure that I pay attention to. Right, that they're the two most important things. If you can always identify where your swing high is and where your current swing low is, right, then you can draw out the swing range you're within, and then all I'm looking for is that first internal change of character, and I will label that, right, so on and so forth. I'm not drawing on all of these breaks of the internal lows because they're relevant to me, and then once we get that next change of character, I'll then label that as well, okay? Now, as we go through the course, you're going to learn exactly when it's relevant and when I pay attention to it. But for right now, I know I keep ranting about it, but I have to really make this clear to you now. I know it seems a bit pedantic, but if you really understand this exactly, everything will become hopefully a lot more simple as we go on. So before we kind of look at an example right now on actual candlestick charts, what I kind of want to also explain to you is the lesson you are watching right now and the lesson that you are going to watch next after this. Both of these lessons are being added to the course after the course was initially recorded. Okay, now the reason why I'm doing that is because since I initially recorded the course, I have just ever so slightly simplified my view on how I use and map out my market structure. Okay, so these two lessons here are just to really help you keep things as simple as possible. And this is why I'm really being pedantic here and trying to explain that the two main things I'm concentrating on when it comes to structure is the swing highs, the swing lows, and then basically how I map internal structure, and that I only really care about that initial change of character on the internal structure. That's really all I care about. But then obviously I'm trying to only pay attention to that in high value areas. Okay, but you're going to learn how to identify those high value areas at a later date. So if I can keep it simple, this lesson right here, right now, is we're going to focus on internal structure, how we map it, and then how we use change of character. And then the next lesson after this, we're going to look at how I map swing structure and how you can define it mechanically. Okay, so this lesson's internal and change of character. The next lesson is going to be swing structure. And then from then on, then we're going to look at the full chart walkthroughs, just keeping it simple to one time frame. And that is where you're going to see how we combine both swing structure and internal structure together. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, right? So this lesson is going to be about just purely looking at internal structure, how we map it, how we use change of character. Then the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to sort of mechanically define when your swing high and your swing low is, because what I mean by that is when price breaks this swing high to form a swing higher high and it moves up, right? At this point, we can get a bearish change of character here, like we have, and that can signal that potentially we're going to get that swing pullback, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the swing high just yet, because price could keep going up. The bearish change of character, all of that is the internal structure shifting bearish to give us a signal that potentially we're going to have a swing pullback. Okay, but when we get that bearish change of character, it's just a signal, but it does not define that this is now the swing high. Okay, because what can happen is price can continue going up. Right, so what I need to see is a significantly sized pullback. But we're going to look at that in the next lesson. Okay, so hopefully I'm not confusing you unnecessarily here. So right now I'm going to get on with it, right? We're just looking at internal structure, these little movements in price action. Then the next one, we're going to go on to swing structure, and then we'll combine them both together on the chart walkthroughs. Okay, I'm sorry, I know that's pedantic, and I've probably taken about 10 or 15 minutes here, but I just really have to make this simple because I'm getting, a few questions from you guys when I start out. This can be a little bit confusing, but if you nail this now, I promise you everything will become so much more simple in your trading, okay? So let's take a look purely at internal structure and how we use that to identify change of character, okay? So if we just concentrate on this little sort of thing that I've drawn here on the left, right, and we'll look at the stuff on the right in a minute. So purely for internal structure, the reason why these candles are all the same color is because I want to really drive the point home that when we're looking at internal structure, the color of the candle is irrelevant. So what I mean by that, whether it's a bullish candle or whether it's a bearish candle, that has nothing to do with whether price has pulled back or not, okay? So this will make sense as we go through it, right? So a minor high is when price moves up to the upside, okay, right, with this one candle. Now what happens with the next candle? This candle here, you see how it trades higher than the previous candle, right? That means it's still part of the up move. So we have a candle move to the upside, and then we have another candle move to the upside because it breaks the prior candle's high. So for me, both of these candles are all part of the up move, right? But then what happens with this candle here? This candle, it fails to break the previous candle's high, right? So it fails to be, part of this up move here, because for it to continue being, for the internal structure to continue being bullish, it would need to break this candle's highs here, but it's failed to do so, right? And we've now had this move down here. So even if this was a bullish candle, right, it's irrelevant. All that matters is it didn't break the prior candle's high. So it now means we've had that internal pullback. Okay, so what that now means is this becomes that minor high, right? That internal high, that fractal high, whatever you want to call it. There are tons of different names in the trading industry, all for very similar things, unfortunately, and I appreciate that makes it very confusing. So I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. And kind of going forward, I think the easiest way is just to refer to these as minor highs and lows, okay? So for me, all I'm looking for is for price to break the previous candle's high, and that continues to tell me it's part of the up move. And then the moment that we get a candle like this, right, where it fails to break the prior candle's high, that now means that price has pulled back. So now I can mark this out as a minor high, right, because it means price has come up and it's pulled back, okay? So that gives me a high. Now the opposite to that is a low, right? You can see here price moves down, the next candle breaks the prior candle's low. You see how it wicks below? Okay, a wick is enough, right? It can be a candle closure or a wick. All I care about is wicks, okay? Type 2 mapping for when I'm looking at internal structure. Okay, I've written that over here. So for internal structure, I'm purely looking at, I draw the line on the wick and price can close or wick above it. Okay, wick breaks are fine. For swing structure, I want to see a candle closure, but we'll look at that in the next video, okay? So again, when we have a low, what happens? Price moves down, the next candle breaks this low, so it's part of the down move. Did the next candle break the prior candle's low? No, it didn't. So now we have price pulling back, okay? So what that gives us is a minor low, right? So here we have a minor high, price moves up, it pulls back. Here we have a minor low, price continues to move down, then it fails to break that candle's low, so now we've had a pullback, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. So now if we kind of come over to here where we have, a series of price action, what has happened? Price has moved up, then the next candle breaks this candle's high, okay? So that's all part of the up move, so you can keep drawing a straight line. This candle fails to break this candle's high. Okay, so now we have had a pullback, right? Then what happens? Now this, right, so we have that down move. Now this candle here, it has failed to break this candle's low. Okay, so this is a minor low now, right? Because what's happened? Now price has pulled back up. So now we continue to the upside and then we take out this high here, right? And that confirms our minor low, right? So now this becomes my new low once we take this high out here. Okay, so then we move to the upside, right? Now this candle fails to break the candle's high, so we start pulling back, right? But I won't label this as my low until it takes a high. Okay, so this is one thing that maybe this here doesn't explain very clearly, but this hopefully should make it very, very clear that when price moves up, it pulls back, okay? And that is a pullback. So as soon as price pulls back, that for me, I'll mark out as a high in a bullish market, right? This is the high, the internal high, right? But it's not until price comes back up and breaks it. It can be a wick or a candle body closure, but it's not until that high is broken that I can then look back and go that this is my low, okay? But I always use the nearest low and this is it, okay? Right, so then price continues the up move, they all break the prior candle's high, then price pulls back, okay? Because it fails to break out this candle's high, so I'd mark that out as my new internal high, right? And it's only once price comes up and wicks it, then I can look back, right? And I'm just looking at the nearest candle, okay? And here, okay, this becomes my new low, right? That is the low that took out the high. Now, what happens is price goes up, but then it pulls back, right? And then it takes out the low. So now we have our change of character. Okay, so you can see how when you have loads of price action like this, I'm not labeling every little break like this with all of the orange lines. I'm only labeling it when the internal structure shifts from bullish. So all of this is bullish. And then we get a bearish change of character, okay? Because this is the first time that the internal structure takes out that low to form an internal lower low. So that's the only one I label on because that's the only one I'm interested in, because it just shows me that we've gone from bullish internal structure to the moment we wick break this, we now have bearish structure, okay? So then price comes down, it all breaks the prior candle's low, then this candle fails to break the prior candle's low, so that's part of the pullback, right? And then we come down and we continue the bearish movement, okay? So when we take that low, this would be the nearest high, but I'm not going to label it because I only care when the bearish internal structure switches bullish, okay? So we have a down move, we have an up move, right? And then we break that internal low to keep forming a lower low, right? We continue trading down. Now we pull back, okay, fine, but nothing happens, right? We continue to stay bearish because then we continue to make a lower low. Okay, cool, not interested, not interested. But then what happens? Then we pull back and we wick break that most recent high, okay? So that is a bullish change of character, right? So hopefully this is starting to make sense. But what will really, really make this clear is right now we're going to hop onto the actual charts and we're going to go through some price action and I'm going to load it candle by candle and you can really understand this. So again, this is very pedantic. It's very slow. We're taking it slowly, but you really need to understand this so there's no confusion when we go forward, okay? So in the live market, I will only ever label on what I call the change of character, which is when that internal bullish structure first shifts to bearish structure, right? But I'm not labeling on every little minor break of structure here, whatever you want to call it, until it does the opposite, right? Until it goes from bearish to bullish and we get that first internal higher high after a series of internal lower highs, okay? Right, If you're a little bit confused, don't worry. What we're going to do now is go on the charts and we're going to go through it. Watch this video as many times as you have to make sure you understand this before you move on, okay? Actually, one just quick thing I want to add before we look at a price action example is, well, an example like this. So let's say the internal structure is making a series of higher highs and higher lows, okay? So price keeps moving to the upside. Right, now let's say price comes into a nice supply level that we like and we see price move down, okay, and it moves up like this and then it moves down like this, okay. Let me zoom in. At this point here, right, this is where you have to be careful, is I'm seeing some people would label that as a change of character because they see this low get taken and they think that this is a lower low. But that is not a change of character. That is not a valid low for what I'm looking to be broken. The reason why this is not a valid low is because this low here, where my mouse is, that low did not achieve anything. Okay, so in a bullish market, for a low, essentially, the one that we care about to be significant, it needs to have done its job. So it needs to have taken out a high. In this instance, this low did not do anything. It did not take out this high. So at this point here, when price comes down and takes out this low, the internal structure has not shifted bearish. Right, and the reason why it has not shifted bearish is because this is the current internal low and this is the current internal high, right? Because you can see here, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, right? This continues, right? This low breaks the high to form a higher high. And now here, we're just pulling back. We have not broken the current low and we have not broken the current high. So price can do anything it wants within here, right? Within the internal high and internal low. It can go up, it can come down, it can, go with whatever. It doesn't matter, right? At the moment, the internal structure is still bullish. So you have to be really careful in the live market that you do not mark a change of character on a low like that, a low that did not achieve a high, or obviously the other way around, and a high that didn't achieve a low. Okay, because at the moment we're still trading between this low here and this high here. Okay, so let's say, right, to make this really, really clear, that price has come into obviously you're going to learn about this later in the course, but price has come into a nice supply level, right, where we would be looking for price to potentially, well, let's just say, keep it simple, potentially have a bearish move from this box here, okay? So what we would do potentially is wait for a bearish change of character first to confirm that this level is going to hold. So we would look for the internal structure to first switch bearish. Okay, so again, forget about swing structure. We're purely just looking at the small movements in price, those small internal movements. At this point here, we want to see a bearish change of character, and where that change of character line would be for me would be, if I mark it out, it would be this level here. Okay, bear with me 1 second. There. Okay, so this would be my most recent internal low, right? That I would need to see go for the internal structure to shift from bullish. Currently, it would need to wick break this at least for it to switch bearish. Okay, so breaking this low here is irrelevant. It's nothing because it's between the internal high and between the internal low. So if I'm waiting for this line to go, but price does not break it, okay, let me just drag this across. All right, price does not yet break it and it continues to the upside, right? I'm not just now going to wait for this low to go because now we have a new low. This is the new internal low. Why is this the new internal low? It's the new internal low because it broke the high. Okay, so I move my change of character line up to here. And now if I was waiting for that bearish changing of character before looking to potentially sell, I would be waiting for this low to go. Okay, because this is my most recent low now because it took out the high, okay? But remember, again, don't want to confuse you, but I would always take the most recent low, okay, the nearest low when we're looking at internal structure. So to explain that, let's say price comes down, it comes up like this, then it has another little pullback, and then it goes up like that, okay? So the internal structure is still bullish. It's now formed an internal high because it took out this internal high here. Now, where is my most recent internal low? Where is the low now that I would need to see be broken in order to get a bearish internal change of character? It's not actually this low, okay? This low here, right? It's the nearest low. So it would be this one here, okay? Because that's the last internal pullback that we had. Okay, so you can see how it's more aggressive than what we do for swing structure, because if this was swing structure, I would be taking the lowest point that took out the high. Okay, so the lowest point in this pullback, right? The lowest point that took out this high, that would be here. But for internal structure, I'm more aggressive. I want to look at the nearest low, okay, that I would need to see go, right? So then likewise, if we were in a bearish market, right, and the internal structure is making lower lows and lower highs, right, and then price did this and then broke that high there. Again, let me zoom in so you can really see it, right? This for me is not a bullish change of character, okay? This high here did not achieve anything. It needs to take out the low for it to be a high that I am interested in. Okay, so currently the internal structure is still bearish because this was the last internal break. Okay, so this is the current low and this is the current high. Okay, so price can do anything it wants in here, but at the moment, until this high here goes, the internal structure is still bearish. Okay, so at this point here, if price was coming down into, let's say, a nice demand level, right? Took me a while to get that out of my mouth, but there we go. This nice demand level here. Let me get rid of this orange line, right? And I wanted to get long, but I'm waiting for that shift in internal structure to shift bullish, and I'm waiting for that bullish change of character. This would be the Choch line, the change of character line, whatever you want to call it. This is the internal high that I am waiting for to be wicked, at least to show me that the internal structure is shifting from bearish to bullish, and we're getting that bullish change of character. So this is the high currently, okay? Now, if price then comes down, right, and then takes the low, where is my nearest internal high? It's going to be here, okay? So now at this point, I move my line and I'm waiting for this high to go. Okay, so then now if price moves up and takes out this high, then we've had the bullish change of character, and then we can look for price to come back and get long, okay? But let me do the other example, all right, just to show you when it's a little bit more, don't want to say complex, but just sometimes slightly different, is let's say, right, so currently this would be our high, right, at this point, because that was the last high that took out a low. So this is my last internal high that I need to see go, right, for structures to shift. Now, let's say that price pulls back and it doesn't break it, and then price comes down, it messes around a little bit, and now we get the break of the low here, the internal low. Now where is my nearest internal high, right? It's not the highest one, it's the nearest one. So now this becomes my change of character line. This becomes my internal high that I need to see be broken for the internal structure to switch bullish. Okay, so when we get that, okay, boom, now we've had our change of character. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of start to see how I view it, where sometimes price action can be a little bit more complex. With internal structure, we always want to pick the nearest, when it's bearish, right? We want to pick the nearest high that took out the internal low. And when the internal structure is bullish, right, and we break this high and we're waiting for it to switch bearish, we want to look at the nearest low that took out the high, okay? Swing structure is different. Swing structure, we always pick the lowest, and when it's here, we would always pick the highest, but we'll get into that in the next lesson, okay? So just try to keep it simple and just try and focus on internal structure for this lesson, and please watch this entire lesson on repeat until it really sinks in before moving on, okay? It doesn't have to be complicated, but I appreciate when you first come to this, or maybe you've had other different ways of viewing the market, you kind of just need to empty your brain out, put a fresh slate in, and view it this way. Right, okay, so let's do it from here. And all I'm going to do is basically mark out my current internal high and my current internal low. So again, forget about swing structure right now and all of that. We're literally just using this sort of super mechanical way to look at the internal price action. So at the moment, this would be kind of my highest point, right? My internal high. And then I just look back to see where is my most recent. So remember, for internal structure, we're always looking at the nearest low and high. Okay, so this one's quite obvious in this regard because this would be that internal low, okay? So we can draw our low from here. So let's play this forward and wait for price to shift. Okay, so now we have pulled back. All right, this candle has failed to break the prior candle's high. So we definitely know that this is our internal high now. All right, so let's play forward. I'm just waiting for the high or low to be wicked. Okay, now we've wicked the high to make another internal high. Where is our most recent internal low? It would be this candle here, okay? So mark that to there. All right, and now we can change this up to here and we'll play the next candle. Okay, that broke the prior candle's high. It's all part of the up move. Next candle broke the prior candle's high, so it's all part of the up move. Okay, let's go forward. Okay, that's part of the up move. Okay, now we have pulled back, okay? So now we are potentially, well, we're just pulling back, so we're just waiting for the internal high. Okay, now it's been wicked, okay? So we formed a high. Now we can bring this upwards to our most recent low. Okay, so it seems quite simple, but there are some price action examples where it can get a little bit more tricky sometimes to figure it out. Okay, now we've pulled back. Nothing's happening, right? Okay, now we have taken out that internal low, right? Remember, all we need is a wick break to form a lower low, right? So now the internal structure for me has switched bearish. This is what I call a change of character, right? So now price has pulled back to form a lower low. Where is my new internal high? Well, it's the nearest point, okay, from where this movement is. So if we look at what the price action occurred, we had a movement up, right? Then we pulled back. Then this candle failed to break the prior candle's low, so that's a pullback, right? But then this candle also failed to break this prior candle's low, right? So we have 3 inside bars here, which is when it gets a bit confusing, right? But because this was the last candle to not break that prior candle's low, that is still a pullback, and then we go, okay? So if you look back, that's all part of the down move, and there we go, okay? So this becomes our internal high. So it's a little bit confusing when there's inside bars here, okay? But if you refer back to that little diagram I have, which shows you what a minor high and a minor low looks like, right? This is where we have that pullback because this candle fails to break the prior candle's low, right? So this becomes our new internal high once this low goes, okay? So now we've had a bearish change of character. This becomes our internal low, right? Now that's part of the down move. Okay, that's part of the down move. All right, now we've had that pullback, right, with internal structure because we failed to break the prior candle's low. That's fine, but the internal structure is still bearish. Just basically sit in my hands and waiting for either the high or the low to go. Okay, now the low is gone. We've made a lower low, an internal lower low. So I'd mark that out there. But where is my most recent internal high now? It's this candle here, okay? So that becomes my nearest internal high. Right, all part of the down move. Then these 2 candles are white candles. They are part of the pullback, okay? So these are inside bars. If you don't know already, an inside bar is a candle that fails to break the prior candle's high or low. So it trades within. So if I draw this on, see how it trades within this high here and this low here? That makes it an inside bar. And then you see how the next candle is white as well. And that's because it's another inside bar that trades in between the high and the low of that inside bar, okay? So I use an indicator for this. If you go up to indicators and you just search for inside bar, right? I think I use like, it's by this guy here, but they're all pretty much the same. If you add that to your charts, you can see up here, it'll be over here and you can hide it, right? That's what it looks like without it. And then that's what it looks like with it. It's just to help you, and it can really help you for a few things as we get through the course, right? Because we'll use it for supply and demand zones as well. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but essentially these candles, they failed to break the prior candle's lower high. So what that tells me is when I see that, it's part of the pullback at this point, okay? So now we have a break of the internal low. Where is our nearest internal high, right? It doesn't stay up here, it becomes this high here, right? Because this is our nearest internal high, right? And then we can shift this down here. Okay, that's part of the down move, right? That's part of the down move. They continue to break the prior candle's low. Now we have that pullback, right? Because it fails to break that prior candle's high. So now we just wait for either the high or the low to go. Did that get wicked? Looks like it didn't. It traded exactly the same. It needs to break it. Okay, so we are still bearish on the internal structure, and now we formed a lower low. Okay, so at this point, where is our most recent high? Well, you can take this high up here, which is pretty much exactly the same, and put it there. But this is where I am even more aggressive, okay? And I'll always take the most recent inside bar if there is one. Okay, so this for me would become my nearest internal high, okay? And now this becomes my most recent low, part of the down move, part of the down move, part of the up move, okay? So now we've started that internal pullback. Wait for the high or low to be wicked. Okay, now we've taken out that low to form a lower low, so we can now draw that down to here. Whereas our most recent high, it's this point here. Okay, so we don't put it all the way up to here like we would with swing structure. We look for the nearest high, okay? Because if you look at price, what happened is price came down, it moved up, it came down, it moved up, and then all of these candles broke the prior candle's low. Okay, so that's all part of the down move. So our most recent internal lower high is up here. Okay, so at this point, if the internal structure, right, obviously it's bearish, if it was to switch bullish, this would be the level that I would have marked out on my charts. I would be waiting, right, for this high to go for there to be a bullish change of character. Okay, so I'm not mapping out the internal high and internal low like this and constantly adjusting it with price in a live market. The reason why we're doing this exercise is so you can understand how to read the internal price action. Because remember, all I am interested in really from a change of character perspective or from an internal structure perspective is when I'm looking for, obviously we're bearish at the moment on the internal structure, but I'm waiting for it to switch bullish. If I was looking, for that bullish change of character, okay? So now, again, we make another lower low, and then that becomes our new range, okay? So I'm going to leave that there. I'm not going to keep going because I don't want this video to be, hours long. Hopefully you're understanding how sort of to read internal structure. But what you'll see as we go through the course is I'm not drawing on all of that. I'm not marking every internal structure break. All I care about is the first time that internal structure switches from bullish to bearish or switches from bearish to bullish. And that would be my change of character, okay? So we can label some of these on. So like you see how price came up, it pulled back to form that internal lower low. It then went up to form that internal higher high. But then what happened? Then we took out that, I'll just mark out with the Choch line, right? We then took out that internal low to make a lower low, okay? So that would be the bearish change of character from that wick there that I would then mark on. And what does that signal? That signals that potentially we're going to be pulling back now, okay? Now, the internal structure stays bullish for a fair amount until what? So this is where we came down, right? Remember? We came up and then we moved down, right? So then this was my internal high. This was my internal low. But what happened? Did price come up and break it? I don't think it did. No, it didn't break it. Remember, it didn't break above it. So we never got a bullish change of character. The internal structure stayed bearish the entire time. And then we continued trading to the downside, right? All of these candles here broke the prior candle's low. It's all part of the down move. So at that point, this is where I'm very, very aggressive with where I mark my most recent high. I have it on the nearest inside bar. So then this was here. Price pulled all the way back up, but it never broke that internal high, right? So it stayed bearish the entire time. And then we broke this low, okay? And then this is where we've just continued to stay bearish, okay? So hopefully that makes sense of kind of how I map the internal structure. I don't know if I can explain it any clearer than that. If it is a little bit confusing, watch it as many times as you need. But essentially, how we're going to use this in the live market is only looking for when that internal structure shifts from either bullish to bearish or bearish to bullish. And we essentially use that to signal that a pullback may be starting or a pullback may be ending. Okay, so I'm going to leave this video here. Now in the next video, we're going to look at how I map swing structure and how you can kind of use a mechanical method for that. And then from the videos then onwards, we're going to look at how we combine them both together. And we're going to kind of do those full in-depth chart walkthroughs. Okay, so just remember as well, I've added this lesson and the next lesson in ad hoc to the course. So since the course was initially filmed, so you may hear me refer to minor breaks of structure or substructure breaks, but all of that, all I'm referring to is what we've gone through today in this lesson. It's just the internal structure. Okay, so all I care about is the big swings and the internal structure, and essentially just refer to that as minor structures. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of help you to keep things simple. But if you're a little bit confused, don't worry. Watch this through a few times, and then as we go through the next lessons, the penny will start to drop, and you'll see how we read price action. Okay.